Good evening and welcome, everyone. We're just waiting for participants to enter from the waiting room. So we'll give people a few minutes to get logged into the webinar, and then we'll start shortly. Just at 7 o'clock. Maybe just give it a little, maybe one more minute just to make sure that everybody who wants to log on to our presentation this evening has time to get into the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for your patience, allowing us to let everybody who had signed up get into the webinar. I'm going to get things started this evening. Welcome to our Spotlight on Research. I'm Joanne Bracken, the CEO of the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan, and it's my pleasure to share research presentations with you this evening. Before the program gets underway, there are a few things that I would like to bring to your attention. For tonight's presentation, all participants on the webinar are automatically muted. Your video and names are not shown to presenters or to other participants in our webinar format. There will be a question and answer period following the presentations, and you may enter questions at any time using the Q&A panel, which is available on your screen. We will do our best to answer as many of the questions as possible during our time allotted, and only questions relevant to the presentations this evening will be addressed. Tonight's presentation is being recorded. I welcome you and acknowledge that I am attending this evening's presentation on the traditional lands of the Treaty 4 territory. And across Saskatchewan, the Alzheimer's Society is privileged to live and work across the traditionally sacred land we now know as Saskatchewan. We recognize the enduring presence of the Cree, Dakota, Dene, Nakota, Lakota, Saulteaux, and Métis people who are the original stewards of the rolling hills, rushing rivers, and the living sky that we all share today. As an organization, we acknowledge the harms of the past and how Indigenous people are still impacted by the process of colonization. Through partnership, education, and collective action, we commit to honoring our relationship to the land, our treaties, and to each other as we journey towards reconciliation. On behalf of the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan, thank you for joining us tonight. Funding research through the Alzheimer's Society Research Program and the Dementia Solutions Program in partnership with the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation remains a top priority for our board, as we know that funding dementia research is lagging behind other chronic diseases. All of our researchers tonight are funded through these two programs, and thanks to the generosity of our donors. Annually, there's an $11 million gap in funding between fundable projects and the amount of money that we have to support them. Many deserving projects go unfunded. Studies show that over the next 30 years, the number of people living with dementia in Saskatchewan will more than double. And that's why it's more important than ever that the Alzheimer's Society funds research to advance our knowledge of dementia and improve the quality of life for people living with dementia and their families and caregivers. Research also guides the evidence-based programs and the support we are proud to offer. If you're interested in participating in research, the Alzheimer's Society Research Portal helps connect participants with a wide range of research studies, including studies for both people living with dementia, their caregivers, and family members, as well as clinical and observational trials. For more information, please visit our website. And a link will be sent out following this presentation to help you access the research portal. Research is essential to providing hope for families living with dementia, and investments in research are key to changing the future for people living with dementia. Tonight, we're excited to share with you 4 research presentations on dementia currently that are taking place in our province of Saskatchewan. Before I introduce our researchers, Merle Wiley is here to share her lived experience with dementia.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here speaking to you tonight. I feel to understand something completely, you need to immerse yourself into something physically and mentally. Well, our journey with Alzheimer's has immersed us physically and mentally 24/7. And it has been a time when you, an example I'm going to give you is when your care partner asks you something 4 or 5 times, the same question in a half an hour, and you just nod again. You can laugh, or you can cry, or you can do both. Some days I do both. Or pull out my hair. No. Dean and I have been married for 40 years. We have 2 lovely children, and now they have their spouses, and we have 5 wonderful grandchildren and our extended family. I used to work at a school, therefore I had my summers off, and I would go back and forth between Elkhorn and Russell to see our kids, and I would take off going across country. And I think, oh, how nice. How nice it would be if Dean could join me, and even more if we could have a camper and we could just spend our summers together and just do so many things. Dean didn't retire, but we did buy a truck and camper, and it has been a delight. As an interprovincial carpenter, he was quick to add all sorts of things to our camper that he thought we needed and have come in very handy. We started taking our kids and our grandkids with us, and I am so glad that we have. There's so many happy memories that I hope that they are going to continue to share from generation to generation. Of that squirrel that went under the camper, and that time the bird ate grandma's sandals, and all sorts of good things. Dean did retire, and I kept working. But I started to notice subtle changes in my Dean. He appeared less motivated. Dean always trying new things and to keep busy and to be making things. We were in a downward spiral, and Dean was diagnosed. There was so much sorrow and heartbreak that I was not physically losing my husband, but losing my husband that was once so strong and able to see the confusion on his face, to have him voice his concern as to what is happening and what is the future going to be. In my head, I would echo, I don't know, but I'm scared too. Out loud, I would say, I know you're frustrated, but we're in this together. Our next devastating event was when Dean had to turn his driver's license in. We live in a rural community. Dean is a farm boy. To tell a farm boy you have to give up your license, well, just punch him in the gut. The feeling is the same. The loss of your independence and your ability to go on your own to do things. I drive, and he is okay with that. One of the comments from our grandchildren one time after we got back from a trip was, Grandma, Grandpa really gives you a lot of advice when you're driving, doesn't he? I said, yes, he does. But we have moved on from that. And to continue our love of camping with our kids, I've learned how to drive our truck and camper. But if you see a black truck with a fifth wheel on the road, maybe just give me some space. But Dean does not enjoy his camping the way he once did. So I hang on to the memories, as I think our family does, of the good times, because we don't really know what the summer will hold. We do one activity at a time. I don't say, Dean, can you please go out and get the mail and get some lettuce and take out the garbage? It just doesn't go well for both of us. It's easier to do one at a time. When I was visiting a former principal and he asked how things are going with Dean, knowing that I had worked for 30 years in a school as an EA and as a library technician and first aid, and that I was back and forth and all over the place. And when I said, yeah, one task at a time, and he looked at me and goes, and how's that going for you? We both had a laugh, a chuckle, and a tear. We say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community to support a person with Alzheimer's and their care partner. And we live in such a wonderful community where people take Dean where he's at and they still include him, which I'm forever grateful. Most people see him where he's at. And as I say, I'm so grateful for that. In the summer, Dean he painted a big Wiley sign and put it at the end of our driveway. And a few weeks later, he said to me, I put that up in case I can't remember to get home sometime. I said, well, that's good. Other people will know where we are too. No, that's good. Some of my anguish is watching when Dean is playing cards with his children and grandchildren. Dean has taught 2 generations how to play cribbage and how to play other card games. Now he struggles with how to remember how to play the game and the rules of the game. And he'll hold up his hand and he'll play his card, and our grandchildren will just quietly and put that card back in his hand and place the right card, and the game continues. The first support that we had that has been such a game changer has been our dementia-friendly enrichment program through Saskabilities in Yorkton. It is an absolutely fabulous program, and we have an awesome facilitator that will do all these different activities with Dean that he loves. They go on nature walks, and they've been canoeing, and they just go bowling, and they cook together. They come to our house and they cook all sorts of wonderful chicken soup, and it's been great. We meet once a month as a group, and meeting and bonding with other care partners is just so important. You realize, okay, there's other people that have these issues, and that worked for them, maybe it can work for us. Other activities and programs that we've been part of is Cognitive Kitchen, another fabulous program. Dean loves to cook, and Julie and her mom, just amazing, just amazing. Another one that we did was Belong Where You Find Yourself. It was an art program at the Godfrey Jean in Yorkton. Again, Amber and Alana were absolutely amazing. These programs are so important for people with Alzheimer's and their care partners to get out and be amongst other people and to try new things. And I just can't say enough good things about them. They're so good. For us, our constant, our family and our friends with their love and support. Being able to call on them or have one of them come and pick up Dean take them for a drive. So important. Thank you, you guys. Thank you, everyone, for listening tonight and being part of the panel, and to our research teams. Thank you. We need you. We need you doing the research. We need you to be listening to us. We need the sponsors and the people that work for Saskatchewan Alzheimer's. You're so important to us. You give us hope and light at the end of our days and for another day to continue. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you so much, Merle. Thank you for bringing perspective to the evening. Thank you for sharing your journey. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I know sometimes it can be difficult to share a story, but I saw your humor in it. I saw your appreciation for dementia-friendly communities and for the supports around you, both your family and supports from a variety of different organizations that are providing dementia services. And I agree with you. It takes that community and it takes that village for people to live well with dementia. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I think that really helps us to emphasize the importance of research, because it does make a difference for people living with dementia. This evening, we have 4 research presentations. Dr. Darrell Mousseau, a professor in the Department of Psychiatry and the director of the Cell Signaling Laboratory at the University of Saskatchewan. Dr. Allison from the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition at the University of Saskatchewan. Louise Castillo, a second-year PhD student in clinical psychology from the University of Regina. And the Regional Psychiatric Center Dementia Research Team, which includes Dr. Arlene Kent-Wilkinson, Dr. Krista Lagimodiere, Dr. Bryce Stoliker, and Dr. Krista. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker for this evening, Dr. Darrell Mousseau. Dr. Mousseau received his PhD in neurochemistry from the University of Alberta and did postdoctoral training at the University of Minnesota and the University of Montreal. He is now a professor in the Department of Psychiatry and the director of the Cell Signaling Laboratory at the University of Saskatchewan. Dr. Mousseau is well known to the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan. In addition to being an honorary life member, he was also the Saskatchewan Research Chair in Alzheimer's disease and related dementia for 10 years, jointly funded by the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan and the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation. Since his chair, and more recently, he has started working with brain organoids, also known as brains in a dish. These brains in a dish could be used to study how Alzheimer's disease progresses in a more brain-like environment. These brain organoids can also help with confirming a diagnosis in patients who may be at the earliest stages of Alzheimer's disease, and could also be used to determine which treatments could be at the most beneficial to patients. Welcome, Dr. Mousseau, and we look forward to your presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that introduction, Joe. Can you hear me? Just give me a thumbs up or a hand or something, and then we can proceed. We're good? All right. Thank you very much. So that's a wonderful introduction. I want to thank Merle as well for sharing her journey with us. It certainly helps us to put into perspective what it is that we do and why we do it. I also want to take this opportunity while I've got the floor to thank Joanne for all of her help as the CEO of the Alzheimer's Society over these last years. Her help, her insight, her support has been fantastic, and I'll always cherish our friendship and cherish our collaboration. So thank you very much, Joanne, and welcome Cleta to the role. So chances are that we'll be chatting more. I'm just going to share my screen with you very, very quickly, and then maybe we can get moving with what I was invited to do. Okay, I'm going to assume that everyone can see this. Okay, and I will take the laser option. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about brain organoids. I think Joanne pretty much gave my presentation in 2 minutes, so I don't have much more to say. But maybe what I'll do is I'll give a couple of details about what we've been doing. And I've kind of given this tenuous title here, an accurate diagnosis can help find the proper treatment. And that sounds obvious, but in actual fact, one of the issues that most of you are probably very well aware of is that it's very, very difficult to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. Usually it's suspected, and usually you have to go through a barrage of tests and whatnot to finally come to an agreement on diagnosis. What I'm going to try to show you here is that maybe there's something that can help with diagnosing Alzheimer's disease, and then once you've diagnosed it, if it's early enough, then maybe we can start proper treatment. So I do want to acknowledge that we are meeting this evening on Treaty 6 territory. That's where I would be from, and then Treaty 4 in Regina, and of course the homeland of the Métis, and I pay my respects to these First Nations and Métis ancestors, and obviously the relationship that we have with one another. I'll give just a little bit of an overview of Alzheimer's disease, particularly the pathology, and then I will go into a little bit more detail on what brain organoids are and what use they have. So this is just to give you an idea of some of the work that we did while we were with the research chair. Just the money, I think, was well used. We looked at the link between depression and Alzheimer's disease, and you can see we've published a number of papers. These are not the only ones, but just to give you a highlight, we're showing links between depression risk and our depression risk of Alzheimer's. We see it in animal models sometimes. There's overlap between proteins that are related to depression and markers of Alzheimer's disease in animal models. We've also used autopsied brain tissues here to show that some of the changes that are found in Alzheimer's actually align differently in men and women. That's not only the Alzheimer markers, but also the depression markers, which makes us think that maybe the disease follows two courses in men and women. You know, one is particular to males and the other one to women. We're currently applying for funding from CIHR, which is one of the Canadian federal funding agencies, to follow up on this link between depression and Alzheimer's, a different angle of it. And the Alzheimer, the research chair also allowed us to detect a new mutation that could be used for confirming risk of Alzheimer's very, very early on. And so we're also applying for funding for that. But what I want to talk to you a little bit more about today are these brain organoids here that I've highlighted in this review here that we've just recently published. I'll give you a little bit of background. So the brain organoids, what actually are they? And the names basically speaks for it. It's an organoid, which is kind of a model of, and in this case, it's a model of the organ, the brain. And why is it important to have this? Is this just some cool little thing that we can brag about? Well, no, in fact, one of the problems that many researchers have come to understand, and it's a challenge and it's an obstacle, is that we don't have very many good models of the human brain. We have animal models, we have cell culture models, we have this model, we have that model, but none of those models really reflect what's going on in the human brain. And that's because we don't allow the cells to do what they like to do best, which is to interact and they communicate with each other and whatnot. But with a postdoc of mine, the fellow that's highlighted up here in the corner, Dr. Mousseau, we put together some brain organoids. Now, these were established elsewhere almost 10 years ago, but all of the brain organoid protocols that are out there generate brain-like cells, but only 3 of the major brain cell types. So neurons, astrocytes, which are supportive cells, and oligodendrocytes, which are kind of also very helpful for making neurons function. But none of these protocols include a cell type that's called microglia, and these are the immune cells of the brain. They help to clean the brain up. They help to make sure that there's reactions if there's any diseases or infections. So if you don't consider microglia in your study, then you're not getting the full picture about what Alzheimer's disease is all about and what it's doing in the human brain. We're one of 5 groups in Canada that's currently using these brain organoids, but more importantly, we're only one of 2 groups in the world that can actually make these brain organoids with these microglia. So that gives us a really, really distinct and cutting edge advantage in this field. And we're thinking that because we can make these good copies of a donor's brain from a blood sample, This really helps us to take our results from the bench and then translate it back to the clinic. So here's just what brain organoids look like. I won't go into too much detail. You can see that once they start growing, we can look for different markers of different types of cells, and you can see they're layering very nicely. It's not like the cells just all come together in some clump and they don't do much of anything. They actually start to layer the way that you would see them layering within the brain. And so they really are a copy of the donor's brain. It's not as complicated as the real brain, but it's certainly a better copy than just taking a blood sample and saying this protein increases or this protein decreases and trying to go from there. We can actually generate these from a patient brain or a patient blood sample, and it really gives us a good idea of what's going on within the brain. And I'll show you here some examples. So this is a male and a female. These are twins, so a brother and sister. And you can see these are just controls. These are not people who have Alzheimer's disease. And these little bands on these blots are just proteins. This is our way of looking at different proteins that are within the brain. I won't go into too much detail here, but you can see that some bands are kind of the same between the males and females, and others are quite distinctly different. This one here is very, very strong banding in the male and weaker banding up here. But the more important one, let me tell you a secret, is this band up here, which means that actually the female connections are far stronger in the brain organoid than her brother. Her brother's weaker connections, and I'm not going to go into why that would be. But other markers of cells called glia, which are supportive cells, they help to maintain nutrition and bring water to the neurons and to the brain. They develop at different times in the male and female, and we can start to understand now, okay, there are male and female differences, and we can look at this in a model of that person's brain. So we're all here today to talk about Alzheimer's, so let me take you into this for just a second or two. I like to show this slide here because it kind of explains what two of the major markers of Alzheimer's disease do. And a marker is simply a protein that we can use to confirm a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. I'm sure you've heard of both of them. One of them is called beta amyloid. It forms the beta amyloid plaques. And the other one is called phospho-tau. And phospho-tau helps to form the neurofibrillary tangles. And I like to use this example here to show that they can both disrupt the function of the cell. If you imagine this train track here to be this connection here between the nerve body and what it wants to connect to out here, if something falls onto the train track, obviously nothing's going to be transported down it anymore. And that can happen if you have a plaque that finds its way and blocks this extension. The connection between this cell and the next one is blocked. The same way, the tracks are still there, but the support mechanism is not. And that's what neurofibrillary tangles look like. That's like what this is here. So both of them disrupt traffic, and they both end up with the same kind of an outcome, which is Alzheimer's disease. Why is that important again? Well, here we compared a female control to a female with Alzheimer's disease. And you can see here, there's some radical differences between the female donor who's a control and the Alzheimer's one. There's big differences in the amount of phospho-tau. We all have a little bit of phospho-tau, so it's not a surprise that it's there in the control. But look at it in the Alzheimer's one. It's very, very highly expressed. And there's this small band down here, which I won't go into detail, but it's actually very important for telling us that tau is actually disrupted fully. You can see there's a little bit in the control brain, but it goes back to normal. In the Alzheimer's brain, it's there, and it's there for the duration of the 90 days that brain organoid is in culture. If we look at immune cells, you can see there's a little bit of activation here. Again, not a big of a surprise. There's much more in the Alzheimer's one, and it kind of dies off a little bit. But that big change is what probably triggers some of these Alzheimer's changes. And again, we looked at some of the other markers. So this is very important because this now allows us to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. We can take a patient's blood sample, we can grow brain organoids from that blood sample, and we can monitor those brain organoids every 10 days in culture, and we can tell the donor of that blood sample whether they are more than likely to have Alzheimer's disease based on the types of proteins that change. Why is that important? Well, there have been a number of papers that have been published recently to show that there are many different subtypes of Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is not one disease, and I think that's not a surprise, I think, for most people who have actually encountered individuals with Alzheimer's. There are many different behavioral changes depending on the person. Some are more aggressive, some are less aggressive. And so the one-size-fits-all treatment approach is not going to work, not a big surprise. If you can't identify if your loved one is a B2 subtype or a C2 subtype, and they're given a drug that has no effect, of course it's going to have no effect because they don't have the proteins that are changed. This is where research is going, and we think that being able to use brain organoids to tell with some certainty patient A has A or B1 or B2 or C1 or C2, that will help the clinician decide, I can use this drug or this drug or this drug. I won't waste my time by prescribing this other drug. And that's very important because, as most of you are aware, we've been doing drug trials for Alzheimer's disease since the year 2000, and we are no closer, unfortunately, to a cure. We have major hope out there, we have major promise, but there's none that have come back and said with any certainty, here is the drug, because they consider Alzheimer's disease to be one disease and not several, and they're not treating the individual with their type of Alzheimer's. They're just trying to find that magic drug that's going to fit everyone. So I want to stop there. I want to, of course, thank the Alzheimer's Society and SHRF for the research chair. Here's some more of my funders, and the questions, as Joanne has said, will be left until the very end. I thank you very, very much for your time, and I will stop sharing here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mousseau. And as Dr. Mousseau said, if you have questions, you can start putting them in the question and answer. And at the end of the presentation, we can get Dr. Mousseau to answer those questions for you. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Allison Kammer. Dr. Allison Kammer is an assistant professor and registered dietitian in the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition at the University of Saskatchewan. Her graduate degrees include a Master of Science in Community Health and Epidemiology and a PhD in Nutrition. Her research focuses on nutrition and dementia, spanning prevention, living well in the community, and long-term care to the end-of-life nutrition. She is a member of several interprofessional research teams, including the Rural Dementia Action Research Team and Team 15 on the Canadian Consortium of Neurodegeneration and Aging. She is also a board member of the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan and co-chairs the Professional Conduct Committee of the College of Dietitians of Saskatchewan. Welcome, Dr. Kammer.
Thanks, Joanne. Just try to share my screen now. Okay, can everyone see that? Can someone give me a wave if you can see it and if you can hear me? Great. So thank you so much for inviting me to share an applied research project that our team has been working on. The Cognitive Kitchen is a community-based nutrition education intervention designed to communicate evidence-based eating strategies and lifestyle habits for dementia prevention and living well with dementia. And I'm very excited to share it with you tonight. So how did we get there, or to this place? It started with some patient-oriented research meetings back in 2018 as a part of the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration and Aging Team 15. Care partners expressed difficulty in taking on new roles related to grocery shopping and meal preparation, and confusion about what is healthy eating. There's so much information out there. They also described experiences of social isolation and challenges to accessing supportive services while managing care, particularly when they have to also address food and eating on a regular basis. So ideas started to germinate. How could we support persons living with dementia and their care partners in navigating the complex world of nutrition, information, and misinformation? So we embarked on a process of co-design, including researchers, clinicians, persons with lived experience, and students. What evolved out of our initial meetings was a strong interest in a positive approach using nutrition risk reduction and living well with dementia as the focus. The aim was to combine evidence-based dietary patterns, evidence-based strategies for nutrition, and other sources of evidence about nutrition and dementia. And our goal was to develop a program and resources to support the program. Now I'll give a little taste of 4 areas of evidence that we included in developing the intervention. So starting with evidence about modifiable risk factors that have been shown to prevent cognitive impairment and dementia. We know that there are dietary patterns that are known to be protective or reduce our risk of developing dementia, and then others that increase our risk. We know about other factors that increase our risk for developing dementia, and those are listed at the bottom of the slide. You'll see that several of these can be connected to nutrition, including certain lifestyle habits, chronic conditions, and low social contact. Digging into the evidence-based dietary patterns, what do we know right now about why and how nutrition may play a role in dementia prevention? Well, the DASH diet, Mediterranean diet, and MIND diet, which is a Mediterranean DASH intervention for neurodegenerative delay, purposefully built to prevent or delay dementia progression, and the Canadian Developed Brain Health Food Guide are all associated with reducing risk of dementia. And what these eating patterns have in common is a focus on whole grains, vegetables and fruit, beans, peas, legumes, healthy fats, nuts and fish, and a real focus on balance and variety. There are several proposed mechanisms on why these make sense from a pathophysiological view, including links to the gut-brain axis, cardiometabolic health, and antioxidant effects. So given the multiple factors and food components that are involved in the etiology of dementia, a magic bullet approach that some people try to sell, like a strict diet regime or mega supplementation of a particular phytochemical or nutrient, that those tend to oversimplify and make unrealistic claims. We also know that decisions around food and meal preparation take place within a complex environment involving individual, social, and physical contexts. I like to say that we eat food, not nutrients. So a whole diet approach that incorporates lifestyle habits as well as that food is the recommended approach. The third component is the evidence about strategies for delivering nutrition interventions. So community-tailored group nutrition interventions, such as community kitchens, they've shown to be very effective. Typically, these are done in person and include an education component and a demonstration or a hands-on application. While there's literature about effective virtual education, there's little or none about using virtual platforms to facilitate the practical application aspect. We were interested in the virtual format as a way to reach rural and remote communities. And while there's literature about the psychosocial benefits of in-person cooking interventions to promote self-efficacy and socialization, there's no literature addressing whether this can be achieved through virtual delivery. We know that socialization plays a valuable role in dementia prevention on its own and living well with dementia. And it's also a key for nutritional well-being. Socialization is now included as a recommendation in Canada's Food Guide for Healthy Eating. Finally, there are 2 relevant evidence-based concepts that frame our approach. The first of these are food literacy and food agency. Food literacy refers to the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary to make informed decisions about food and its impact on health. And food agency describes the ability of people to navigate their unique food environments. We know that there are many sociocultural and environmental factors affecting our food choices. So food agency recognizes that cooking is not just about the technical and manual skills required to purchase food, follow a recipe. Food agency involves the organizational and cognitive skills required to navigate the food environment effectively. So this requires a flexible approach that can empower participants to adapt information and apply it to their own unique context and personal situation. And last is the PERMA model. It was developed by a psychologist to outline the various dimensions of overall holistic well-being. And in 2021, it was applied to culinary health interventions. So if you can look at the list on the screen, the domains of the PERMA model are positive emotions, so motivating to see cooking and mealtimes as an activity for well-being and not as a chore. Engagement, to get into the flow while cooking or eating. Relationship, fostering social connections through food. meaning, making the food-related experiences meaningful, and achievement, empowering people to apply information within their own personal situation. So we drew on these 4 sources of evidence to develop the Cognitive Kitchen program. And we also considered factors like access, affordability, and abilities overlaid with rural location and dementia context, the dementia experience, and the dietary needs, preferences, and perhaps medical nutrition therapies of participants that they might have to tailor the program specifically. And what did we come up with? Well, the Cognitive Kitchen is a 6-week program. It's facilitated by a registered dietitian. It includes once-weekly sessions that last about 2 hours. Each session has a theme, and each session includes an overt educational component that's delivered directly within the session, a culinary demonstration, participation in cooking. So you prepare about 2 to 3 items per week, meaning you have your supper and some meals for the rest of the week. And it also includes a covert educational component, and that's not directly delivered, but it's modeled, including some examples would be things like safe food handling, personal safety in the kitchen, a cook once, eat twice philosophy, busting myths, cultural components of eating, cultivating an adventurous food spirit, those kinds of things. And then a socialization component that's directly built into the session. As well, the Cognitive Kitchen program was developed to support the learning journey through the 6 sessions. So the Cognitive Kitchen as a program, you can see on the screen what the topics or the general overall theme for each of the 6 weeks is. And the program funding to operate the Cognitive Kitchen sessions and the different programs was provided by the Dementia Supports in Rural Saskatchewan, which is an initiative housed in the Saskatchewan Population Health Research Unit at the University of Regina, funded by Public Health Agency of Canada, New Horizons for Seniors Health. So that gives us the money to rent space for in-person, to purchase food, to print our books, and to have a dietitian facilitator to run the program. Without that funding, food's expensive, room rentals are expensive, etc. We wouldn't be able to offer it, so it's instrumental. Then the research component, we're funded through a SURF Solutions Innovation Grant. And we were funded to have this embedded applied research component to determine the feasibility and acceptability of the co-designed program. We want to compare virtual and in-person modes of delivery. We want to examine participant experiences, measure outcomes of the participation, so the knowledge, skill, ability, and social connection. So participants in the program are invited to participate as research participants as well. And research participants complete an intake survey, then observational field notes from each session and each program offering are completed by the dietitian facilitator and then a research assistant. Participants are invited to complete a weekly virtual journal describing learnings that they've had, application of learnings, and ask questions that can then be addressed in the upcoming session. Participants then complete an exit survey, and the surveys include embedded validated school scales to measure food agency, food and nutrition skills, and social connection. And finally, participants are invited to participate in an interview with a research assistant to explore their experience of the program, offer suggestions, etc. So in terms of how many programs we've had to date, overall, we've had 5 virtual and 4 in-person offered. And the breakdown is that we had 2 virtual programs initially as pilot. And after we piloted these, we made adaptations to the program materials and the design and the offering. And one example would be that we were trying to see if we could streamline this to a 1-hour session. Too tall of an order, too rushed in terms of the hands-on application, and participants wanted to take a little bit more time to learn and do, and also to socialize and enjoy eating together. So we moved it to 90 minutes to 2 hours. And then we offered 4 in-person programs in rural areas in the surrounding Yorkton area. And we've completed 1 virtual program. It's been completed and all the research measures have have been completed on it as well. And we have 2 virtual programs that are currently in progress with plans for multiple additional future programs. So some lessons learned so far and some more questions that we have to answer. The virtual program does appear to be feasible. We added an orientation session to familiarize participants with Zoom and maybe help them to feel more comfortable if they're new to Zoom or they're unsure of how to set it up in a place that would enable them to have food available and work within their kitchens. So that seemed to be very helpful, and it's a nice addition. Overall, participants enjoy the learning combined with the practical application. The things that they seem to remember and that stand out to them are more the practical application than the actual educational component, which holds true of other literature. So it's nice to see that that's still happening for us. That application is so important. The group discussion that happens as a result of the structured socialization is proving to be very beneficial in terms of just general social support and also for the learning outcomes. We've had a Master's of Science in Nutrition student complete thesis research diving into how socialization functions within the virtual culinary health intervention, and that publication should be coming out from that soon. We've looked at various offerings saying, should it be care partners in one group without persons living with dementia, or care partners and persons living with dementia, and the prevention strategy, etc. We're still unpacking the data on that. So far, it seems like the mixed group offers a lot of advantages and is more feasible than perhaps the literature would have suggested. A big thing that we wanted to unpack is, can a virtual program be equivalent to in-person? We weren't sure about equivalency, but could it be good enough so that it overcomes those barriers to participation, like travel and the cost associated with travel, etc. We are actually surprised to learn that there are some advantages that are offered in the virtual programming. Some participants have said that they were nervous about their own personal skills or abilities and might not have participated in an in-person session because of that self-consciousness, that they would feel judged, that they weren't as skilled in a kitchen as others. So there's less pressure in that virtual environment where they can do it on their own, off to the side, and not feel that others are watching them, perhaps. There's also aspects about noise, because participants typically mute while the facilitator is working with the food and describing it with an overhead camera. And you can see our lovely dietitian facilitator, Julie, there with our virtual setup. The noise of the kitchen is dampened. In person, when you have 10 or 12 people working together, there can be a lot of noise. And for people that have hearing impairments or cognitive challenges associated that create those distractions from noise, it can be more challenging, and the virtual environment eliminates that. So that's a nice benefit that we've found, and we'll continue to explore others. So if you're interested in the Cognitive Kitchen program, and I hope I've sold it to you, that it's wonderfully co-designed intervention with a lot of fun, here's how you can participate. There is a QR code on the screen. So if you point your cell phone at that, it will take you directly to information and a survey to complete. Or you can contact the Cognitive Kitchen coordinator, Julie Beidel, at julie.beidel@usas.ca, or her phone number is also listed there. To participate, you either have to be someone who's a resident of Saskatchewan, aged 55 and above, or a care partner of a person living with cognitive impairment or dementia. Our upcoming virtual programs are going to be starting in March 13th on Wednesdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. or March 19th, and that will be the Tuesdays group, which will run from 5 to 7 p.m. And you can also sign up and do the intake survey there, or send an email to Julie just to get on the list for the future offerings, and we will add them as people sign up or express interest. We are funded through the summer to offer programs, and we're trying to find another source of funding for the food so that we can continue to offer this. One of the nice advantages of this being a funded program and with a research component is that your groceries would be reimbursed if you participate in the virtual Cognitive Kitchen program, you can submit for about $50 of coverage for groceries each week as incentive to try those different foods and help to offset your costs of participating. I'll just end by thanking our Cognitive Kitchen team. It's made up of myself, Dr. Megan O'Connell, who's a psychologist at University of Saskatchewan, Dr. Bonnie Jeffrey, who is a social worker and professor at University of Regina, Edna Parrott, who is from Yorkton, Norma Stewart from Saskatoon, Julie Beidel, who's our Cognitive Kitchen coordinator and registered dietitian, and Heather Alford, who is a Master's of Science in Nutrition student and works as our research assistant. And I'll just end again with that QR code. So point your phone at the screen, or write down Julie's email or phone or the website to express interest to participate. I really hope that some of you on this session do. And so much thanks to the Dementia Supports in Rural Saskatchewan and to Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation for funding really important work that stays with the people of Saskatchewan and helps to benefit our research and the people living with dementia in Saskatchewan. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
And
much.
to the Alzheimer's Society, of course, thank you so much. As a board member and researcher, I can't express enough gratitude for the organization. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Allison. We appreciate your presentation. And I'm sure in our follow-up email, we can include some of that information as well too. So if people didn't have time to scan that QR code, we can help people have access to future opportunities as well. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Regional Psychiatric Center Dementia Research Team. This group is 4 researchers who are going to present on their research. Arlene Kent-Wilkinson is an RN and a PhD professor at the College of Nursing and the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon since 2002. Arlene's teaching, research, and publications are in the areas of forensic nursing education, mental health and addiction, and Indigenous health. Arlene draws from a strong clinical base in emergency, corrections, forensic psych mental health, and addictions. Her teaching dates back to the mid-1990s when she developed the first classroom and online forensic nursing courses globally. Dr. Kent-Wilkinson is the principal investigator and the project leader. Dr. Krista Lagimodiere is a geriatrician in Saskatoon, providing comprehensive geriatric care at Saskatoon City Hospital and Royal University Hospital. She is also involved with several quality improvement and clinical development initiatives in the Saskatchewan Health Authority to improve the care for older adults. In addition to her clinical work, she is an assistant professor in the Division of Geriatric Medicine, Department of Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan, and is involved in teaching undergraduate and postgraduate students. She is honored to serve on the board of the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan since 2022. Dr. Lagimodiere is the co-PI on this study. As a geriatrician with clinical experience in dementia diagnosis and management, she will clinically supervise and administer the comprehensive geriatric assessment to a sample of approximately 30 older adults in custody at the Regional Psychiatric Center. Dr. Bryce Stoliker holds a PhD in Criminology and is a research officer at the Center for Forensic Behavioral Science and Justice Studies at the University of Saskatchewan. Dr. Stoliker has been involved in various research and evaluation projects tasked with assessing criminal justice processes, as well as examining programs and services for justice-involved individuals. His research primarily focuses on correctional populations, particularly the needs of people in custody living with mental health issues. His work in this area is also focused on the physical and mental health needs of the aging correctional population. And Krista Tatro, Master's of Science and a PhD in Psychology, is a postdoctoral fellow at the Canadian Centre for Forensic Behavioural Science and Justice Studies at the University of Saskatchewan. Her primary area of research focuses on protective and risk factors of aggression and extremism, with a special interest in genocide and other toxic situations. Her work in this area has focused on student and community populations. Dr. Tatro has extensive experience in quantitative research methods and advanced statistical analysis, including structure equation modeling. She's been working with quantitative and qualitative research projects in various capacities for over 15 years and has been a lecturer in social and forensic psychology for 6 years abroad in Ireland and now in Canada. Welcome to the Regional Psychiatric Center Dementia Research presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you see the screen and hear me okay? Great. My name is Arlene Kent-Wilkinson, and I'm a professor at the College of Nursing. Our team is really happy to be here to tell you a little bit about our research this evening. The title is Predictability of Screening Tools for the Assessment and Diagnosis of Dementia among Older Persons in Custody. And this is phase 2, which is in progress now of this study. And just to say a little bit about the underlying goal, Correctional Service Canada, where the RPC is located, is part of Regional Psych Center, is a part of our CSC. And CSC Ottawa really wanted us to do this study because I think it's a part of criminal justice reform. All of us that have worked with offenders and with people in custody know that there's some vulnerable populations maybe that would be better served not to be in the big penitentiaries and to be in more secure settings in the community if that was possible. And so I think this is the start of criminal justice reform, in that the goal is if we could make a diagnosis of dementia while they're in custody, that they then could be moved into secure community settings. 4 of us from the team are here tonight to present, and each one will introduce themselves as we proceed here. And this is a list of the entire team. It's a big research team made up of researchers from the University of Saskatchewan, many departments and colleges, medicine, nursing, and most all of the members are part of the Forensic Research Center, which is made up of a multidisciplinary team. And they are psychiatrists, psychologists, nursing, and there's postdocs and staff from the Forensic Center as well on the team, and geriatricians. As well on the team is we have staff from the Regional Psych Center, the executive director and psychiatrist, clinical psychiatrist, as well as the warden. So first we'll start with the land acknowledgement in Saskatchewan and in the Prairie region, which is the region that we're in. We acknowledge that we meet and work across the numbered treaties of 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 ancestral lands and home of the original custodians. They are the Plains Cree, the Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Sioux, Dene, Chippewa, and Métis Nation. So phase 1 and 2 of this research was funded by the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation, SHRF, and also the phase 2 was supported by the impact grant was supported by the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Stoliker, who will start with the presentation overview.
Thank you, Arlene. So just to give a bit of a structure for today's presentation, first we'll get into the background on the Regional Psychiatric Center, just for those who may not be familiar with that, and then jump into sort of the structure of the three-phase project that we have here, and then get into some definitions, provide those research questions for the project, especially the one phase that we're in right now. What are the key research questions there? A little bit of the rationale in terms of why we're doing the study, and then getting into those screening and assessment tools that are a key part of the study, and we'll provide a little bit more background on that and how we've incorporated those and things like that, and then end off with the significance of the study as well. So just to provide a little bit of background of the Regional Psychiatric Center, or RPC for short. So it's quite a unique forensic treatment center. It's one of 5 in Canada, and it's actually one of the only nationally that is an accredited psychiatric hospital as well. And as Arlene mentioned, it's operated by Correctional Service Canada, located here in Saskatoon. And so it has 204 beds. And by and large, RPC, it provides rehabilitation, assessment, treatment, and stabilization for federally sentenced individuals. And those individuals generally come from various institutions across the Prairie region, so Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, for that assessment, treatment, stabilization, and things of that sort. And then typically, they will also go back to the home institution that they may have been transferred from to receive that treatment. And then just in terms of a little bit of background as well, given that it's a forensic psychiatric hospital, it of course has a high percentage of individuals living with severe mental health issues. And then based on the trends that we see in the correctional population in Canada, is that there's of course a high percentage of Indigenous peoples in custody as well in the Regional Psychiatric Center. So a quick overview on the three-phase project. So the first phase, which was funded by SHRF as well, this was conducted in 2019, and the focus of this was to modify a cognitive screening tool, specifically one that was designed to assess individuals for the risk of dementia, to modify that for the correctional setting, and then to identify what is the prevalence of individuals at risk for dementia and needing a follow-up clinical assessment. So that was the focus of the first phase. And then the second phase, which is the one that we're currently in, is it builds off of that. So we're looking at 2 cognitive screening tools, and again, looking at tailoring those to the correctional setting, and then trying to identify, well, what's the prevalence of risk for dementia among individuals in custody at RPC, and then to compare the performance of those tools based on a diagnostic assessment, so a clinical diagnosis of dementia. And then from there, phase 3, which is part of a study that would be determined later, is to roll that out to additional institutions in the Prairie region and to further identify the validity and predictability of those screening tools within a correctional setting. So essentially, it's trying to identify the applicability of those tools for the correctional setting. So just some key terms to keep in mind. With respect to dementia, when we're talking about this in terms of this study, we're referring to the overall set of symptoms that are caused by disorders that are affecting the brain. And then when it comes to older people in custody, the research has generally identified a cutoff of as young as 45 years of age. Of course, that's quite young. But the main reason for this is that plenty of research has identified the trend of accelerated physical aging among individuals who are in custody for various reasons. I won't get into that, but typically what is seen is individuals who experience physical illnesses similar to those who are 10 to 15 years their elder in the community. So that's why there's that age distinction there. And then one key thing in terms of why focus on older individuals in custody, one trend that's been identified recently is the growing, this is a growing demographic in correctional facilities in high-income countries and various countries around the world. So it's growing larger, especially within Canada. And many of these individuals have complex health and social needs. And then, of course, that creates challenges for correctional systems and having to address those. And much like Arlene mentioned, the focus on sort of shifting the paradigm in terms of treating these individuals and things like that within a correctional system. So the key questions for our study, the first is, what is the prevalence of dementia, both in terms of the screening tool and then the diagnostic assessment among older individuals in custody at RPC? The second is, what is that ability of these screening tools to accurately predict a dementia diagnosis? And the third is, which of the two screening tools, which will be discussed in a moment here, are better in predicting that risk of dementia, and then being used as one aspect of the care pathway when it comes to treatment and assessment and things like that for dementia and cognitive impairment within the custodial context. So in terms of the rationale, one thing that I did mention is the key to examine and screen older individuals in custody, potentially living with dementia. And then one thing that I sort of alluded to as well is, the growing demographic and the complex health and social needs. And so people living with dementia have difficulties at all levels of the correctional system. That includes during the interaction with police, being able to participate in their own defense at adjudication, complying with correctional staff within the facility, and that can create some challenges as well in terms of things like inappropriate maybe misconduct or something, and things of that nature. And then in addition to that, there's the potential for victimization and difficulty in following daily schedule or even engaging in basic daily activities and things like that. And so those are the key issues that may be seen across the different aspects of the criminal justice system. And so I'll pass it along to Christy to discuss those screening and assessment tools.
Thanks, Bryce. Hi, everyone. My name is Christy. Can you hear me okay? Everyone? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So as Bryce and Arlene mentioned as well, we're looking at 3 types of tools. And the first 2, the CSID, which is the Community Screening Instrument for Dementia, and the KICA, the Canadian Indigenous Cognitive Assessment. Those are our screening tools that look more at cognitive impairment. And the CGA, or the Comprehensive Geriatric Assessment, is the assessment that's used for a clinical diagnosis of dementia. And that's something that Krista will be discussing in more detail than myself. Both the KICA and the CSID were developed with Indigenous communities and adapted to the prison, to people in custody for a multitude of reasons, as Bryce mentioned as well. So the components of the different screening tools we'll go through first is the CSID. So there are 2 parts to it. There's a participant part and an informant part. And the informant is there and added because other people sometimes will notice that there's been a change in the person before the person themselves will actually notice it. And so it has the participant and informant section. The participant portion has 46 questions in 7 different categories. And just to know that these questions are read to the participants, so it's not a long reading task, but it is quite a few questions. The 7 categories are language expression. So for example, what are these? They point to shoes and the participant is expected to answer shoes. Attention and calculation. So if I have $20 and I give you 2, how much do I still have? Orientation to place. So where do you go when you get sick in RPC? And this example, you can see the adaptation to RPC or people in custody so that it's more, say, where do you go when you get sick? Well, most people would say hospital, but at RPC, you have to be a bit more specific. So it shows the adaptation there to the specific population. Orientation to time. Did it snow yesterday or rain today, earlier this morning? Language comprehension. Just can they follow basic commands? Please nod your head. Praxis or copying. I draw a figure. Can you please replicate this figure as well? Language expression. So just tell me a story about your childhood. But there's also this component of memory recall throughout. So at the beginning, the assessor would introduce himself. My name is Christy, and throughout they'd be like, oh, can you remember what my name is? And this check that memory recall throughout. The informant section is a little bit different, and there's 31 questions in 4 categories. And the informant is always the person that's closest to the person care. So it could be a social worker or a primary nurse. Part of the team there at RPC would be the informant. So there's cognitive and functional impairment that they look at. Are there any changes in activities in the past year? Cognitive functioning behavior. Do they forget where things are usually? Or are they getting lost in the unit where before they weren't getting lost? Daily living activities, do all of a sudden are they having difficulty making their bed where before they didn't? And CSID scores, it's important to note, they can be just based on the participant, but it has better reliability when you can see both the participant as well as the informant section, and then you have better reliability there. For the KICA, you can see it has 15 questions in 11 categories. So it's quite a fewer questions there. So that could be one that's a lot less taxing on the participant. It's also easier for staff to, our RPC staff would be to administer it. And that is really helpful in a lot of ways. So you have orientation to time, the categories here. What time or day is it right now? Recognition and naming. So what is this? Oh, it's a spoon. Registration, tell me what that was or what those were. And again, referring back to the spoon, there's verbal comprehension. So pick up the paper, fold it once, and then give it back to me. Verbal fluency, name as many animals as you can think of, starting with the letter S. And then recall, where did I put the spoon? So maybe on the table there, you put it there. Visual naming, show a pair of pants, name it. And then you're going to have to recall it later. Frontal executive functioning, so copy these letters. So if I write out some letters, the person can copy it. Free recall, do you remember the drawings from before? What were they? Of course, pants. Cued recall, choose the picture that I showed you before, and they choose among the photos and choose the pants. And show how to use the spoon. So this one looks at both explicit knowledge. Can you say it's a explicit cognition? Can you say it's a spoon? And also implicit, do you know how to use it? Because that can be different effects there. And so you can see that the KICA and the CSID have a lot of similarities in categories, but the KICA doesn't have an informant part. So I'm going to pass off to Krista now for the CGA.
Thanks, Christy. So yes, my role on the team is to oversee and conduct the comprehensive geriatric assessment. I apologize, my children are in the background if you hear any noises. Anyhow, so the comprehensive geriatric assessment is the gold standard and best practice for managing frailty in older adults. And as Bryce mentioned, when we talk about those in correctional facilities, there's biological age and chronological age. And so often these individuals, although they're not quote unquote geriatric, they often are impacted by geriatric syndromes, similarly to those in the community that are older. So it's a multi-dimensional interdisciplinary diagnostic assessment and interventional process to identify health-related problems in an individual to provide a holistic management plan. And so as you can see here, we are assessing multiple domains for each individual. And specifically to this study, we're looking at cognition. And there are 2 common screening tools that we use as part of our assessment, which are listed here. And there's certainly overlap with the tools that Christy pointed out as part of the study. But in essence, we're looking at the various areas of the brain that might be impacted by a dementia condition. And so that's what we're looking for in this assessment. So what is the significance and impact of this study? So we want to see the predictability of dementia screening tools to identify those in facilities who may require further evaluation in order to confirm a diagnosis of dementia. And in turn, this will allow us to provide better care for older persons in correctional facilities, provide evidence-based discharge plans to appropriate secure settings in the community, and ultimately the hope to improve their quality of life. By identifying older persons in custody living with dementia, we can allow for more specialized care to be received by those individuals. And we know that the needs of older persons in custody are different in the sense that they may need more individualized discharge services or supports, including housing, healthcare, caregiver support that may not be readily available in the current model, as well as culturally appropriate services and supports to reduce reconviction risk among justice-involved older persons reintegrating into the community. And again, that piece on higher quality of life and reducing strain on families and intergenerational crime risk. I'll pass that on to Arlene to kind of close things up here.
So we'll just end with the conclusion. The ultimate goal pretty much is CSC wants to move some older adults diagnosed with dementia that are in custody, move them to secure community settings. And this would really be a paradigm shift in the criminal justice system. Other vulnerable populations are FASD and mental illness, but the older client with dementia would be one of the first ones to have this move. And these are our selected references. There's been 2 or 3 publications already from this study in phase 1. And Caradol, the second one down, this was the big project, the big project technical report, I guess. And then the second one down as well is Bryce headed up the Stoliker et al. With older people in custody in a forensic psychiatric facility with the prevalence of dementia and community reintegration needs from phase 1. So thank you, and we'll entertain questions at the end of all the presentations. Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Arlene, Krista, Bryce, and Christy. And again, if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we will get to those questions following our final presentation. I'd now like to introduce our final presenter for the evening, Louise Castillo. Louise is a second-year PhD student in clinical psychology at the University of Regina, supervised by Thomas Hadjistravopoulos. Louise's research focuses on improving pain management practices of individuals living with dementia and using science-media partnership for effective knowledge mobilization of pain research. In collaboration with care partners, Louise developed an app that aims to provide coping strategies for caregivers to manage their stress. Her dissertation focuses on evaluating the developed app aimed to improve the psychological outcomes of caregivers of people living with dementia. Louise's doctoral research is supported by an Alzheimer's Society of Canada doctoral scholarship. Welcome, Louise.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna share my screen here. And hopefully you can hear me okay, I think. Okay. Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me here to talk about my PhD research. And I'm really grateful for the support of the Alzheimer's Society of Canada and also the Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan in helping me with this research project, in disseminating this work, and also in the evaluation piece as well. So I'm going to start off with talking about my what led us to looking into this topic and really developing an app that aims to support people, family members caring for people living with dementia. So what we know is that the global prevalence of dementia is projected to increase. And what this really means is that it has a lot of ramifications, not only for the people who are living with dementia, but also the family members who are providing care for those people living with dementia. And what we expect is, given this rise, that there might be a proportional increase in the support networks and the family members who are then caring for people living with dementia. And what I'm really interested in, and I think what's really important when we're talking about, the well-being and overall quality of life of those family members is the impact that it can have on their mental health. So family caregivers of people living with dementia experience high levels of burden, not only from the stresses associated with providing care, but also in the different responsibilities they're navigating as they're going through this experience. So it's really important to look at this and to also highlight this. For instance, care partners of people living with dementia experience higher risk for the development of different mental health conditions like depression as well as anxiety. And ultimately, this can contribute to reduced quality of life for those individuals. And what we also know is that the caregiving process and providing care is quite a complex and multidimensional experience. So even when we're talking about stress and what impacts stress, is that there's really all these different factors that can impact it, right? So, you know, the age of the family member, care partner, the type of coping skills that they're implementing, their mental well-being, if they have, you know, pre-existing mental health conditions that can exacerbate feelings of stress, their physical well-being, and how connected they are to other people. So their degree of social support and finances, employment. So just as all these factors can impact the level of stress that they're experiencing, these are also all the different areas that are impacted when they do experience that stress and impacting their mental health. What the good news is, and what we've seen in the research, is that there are various interventions and resources that are developed for family members. And a lot of these interventions, those face-to-face, traditionally delivered interventions, have been shown to be effective. So this is really good news for what we know about what works. But unfortunately, at the same time, what we also know is that there are various limitations to the uptake of these interventions. And so a lot of research has been done in this area, and various caregivers and care partners have really noted the lack of access to interventions as a primary barrier to uptake. Others have also expressed, you know, the lack of tailored support and how some resources may be inflexible in the way that they're delivered. And then a key component to this too is the lack of mental health resources, which is really concerning given that we know that this is quite prevalent in this population. And other individuals have also found that care partners have expressed geographical barriers to seeking support, and in particular mental health support. And what we know about mental health is that although, you know, we're disseminating this information and resources, is that there are still various stigmas associated with seeking support, and that's very much experienced by different care partners too. So the stigma and the service delivery challenges have been noted as a key barrier to uptake. And in particular, you know, some individuals may not be at a place where they're ready to seek that mental health support, that face-to-face mental health support. So again, various considerations have been noted as barriers to this uptake. But going back to, you know, the good news of these interventions, one area that has really been leveraged recently, and also an area that I'm particularly interested in, is leveraging technology as a way to deliver resources. So I always say when discussing this area is that technology can, you know, help address these limitations. So it's by no way as a way to replace face-to-face interventions or resources as a way to deliver resources. But I think it meets the need of those specific barriers that I've noted. So individuals who might not be ready to seek support, or looking for other ways as an adjunct to the different services that are already using. So technology really has a place in this, in addressing a piece of that. And recent work that I did in my master's research is looking into this and looking at how can we use technology, in particular smartphone and mobile apps, because it's highly proliferated. A lot of people are using apps on their mobile phones. People are increasingly turning to their phones as a way to not only gain information, but also use that information, seek information, share information. So it's an easy way to deliver resources that can also be quite accessible for a lot of people who have those mobile phones. So I wanted to understand, you know, what are the needs of caregivers in the development of mobile apps, and more specifically, what do they actually think about it? So we conducted and actually did a review of different mobile apps that were developed specifically for caregivers and also looked at the effectiveness of them in terms of stress and burden. And I also interviewed different caregivers and asked them their perceptions in their needs in the development of mobile apps and what value they thought that this could add potentially in their care. And one of the things that we found is that most of the apps and the smartphone apps that are currently available on the market right now are related to the needs of the person living with dementia, which is really great because it addresses a particular need. But what that also highlighted is that there are a lack of resources that are currently available that directly address managing caregiver stress. And this was not only highlighted in the research and the review that we did, but also in the discussions that we had with caregivers. So they really noted the lack of mental health resources that are currently available, and also accessible mental health resources was a key consideration there as well. And they saw that smartphone apps and mobile apps in the context of providing care could really add additional support and resources for them. It could be a way to monitor and really collate information in one area because you can just have it in your phone and look at it in your phone. And again, as a way to deliver resources. So one participant in our study noted, that it could be a good way to deliver that resources that caregivers can then go to in their phones. And one of that information, or a part of that information, could be those strategies to manage stress and other self-care activities as well. And they also expressed that, if you're going to make an app and if you're going to deliver these technology and develop these different interventions and deliver it through technology, that user experience needs to be really highlighted. So there were various considerations that they expressed to us that would be important. Unsurprisingly, I think, a key one was really that if you're going to develop something, it needs to be really easy to use. And also within that, having a technical support that can then help the user in navigating through using a new technology or using an app. And they also mentioned the importance of layout and aesthetics in developing one. So keeping in mind large print, including pictures, having that white space to make it more easily readable. And another key consideration was also the cost. So a lot of the participants in our study noted that they would want to use an app, but if we're going to develop one, I'm really considering the cost that it can have for the user. So we took that information, and for my dissertation, my PhD work, I'm really focusing on addressing a piece of that and taking that information, and again, looking at more so the mental health piece and the feedback that we got from that study. So we developed the Your Caregiver app, and this is a psychoeducational resource in an app format that was developed with and based on feedback from caregiver partners, but also based on what we know in the research that has been shown to be effective in ameliorating stress and improving mental health outcomes for care partners. And the goal of this app is to provide different strategies to manage stress. And so the app itself consists of 7 modules. So we completed developing the app, and right now we're in the evaluation phase. Really exciting phase to get more feedback and for modifications for this app. But this app consists of 7 modules that focuses on different coping strategies. So each module consists of text information and also videos, images, and activities that addresses each of these pieces. So identifying signs of stress, problem-solving strategies, taking care of themselves, relaxation strategies, how to manage unhelpful thoughts, as well as highlighting the importance of social support, engaging in more social activities, and various resources. And also the key for a lot of these modules is that we include information, and at the end there are activities again that the user can engage in. And really the idea behind that is we want them to learn the information, but also apply it in their lives. So there are different worksheets that are available in each module. And And in the 7 modules, we focus on different coping strategies and activities. And we had a caregiver partner in our team, and also had different caregivers who were very generous enough to provide feedback in the early iterations of this app, and also provided examples that we could include in the app to really highlight the need that this needed to be tailored and reflect the experiences of care partners. So in the evaluation phase of the Your Caregiver app, we're aiming to recruit 120 caregivers across Canada. And so our recruitment phase and our evaluation phase is currently happening right now. And we're going to randomly assign participants in one of 3 conditions and get them. And one of those conditions will be using the app and assessing and comparing levels of stress, mental health outcomes, as well as burden over an entire 12-week period. So they'll be using the app for an 8-week period, and then we'll have a 4-week follow-up at the end. And a part of this evaluation, including the different measures that we're going to be collecting, are going to be the interviews with the participants in the study to really get a sense of their perception in using the app. And again, more importantly, this will really help inform the modifications to the app in later iterations. And ultimately, for us, the goal of the Your Caregiver app and what we hope to achieve from this is to ultimately improve the quality of life of care partners, targeting one piece and one really important piece in their experience, and that's their mental health. And mobile apps, I believe, can really help expedite the delivery of interventions in an accessible as well as a cost-effective manner. Ultimately, at the end of this, once we have more of this data as well, that this will be freely available for care partners as an adjunct, again, for the types of as a support for them as they're going through this process. And the goal for this is to provide support, hopefully help increase their capacity and resilience, and facilitate that delivery of care by eliminating any physical or geographical barriers that caregivers may experience in seeking mental health support. And so I thought it would be important to include this, and hopefully I've provided a lot of information about how we're evaluating this study. So if you're at all interested or know of anyone that might be interested in helping us with this research, feel free to send us an email at yourcaregiverapp@uregina.ca. And thank you again so much. And I'd just like to acknowledge the different support that I've gotten from this project as well, funding agencies, the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, and also my research supervisor, Dr. Thomas Hijrosopoulos, who's made this possible too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise. And thank you to all of our presenters. I'll ask all of our research presenters to turn your cameras back on, and we are going to enter into the question and answer portion. We're currently helping Louise to recruit for that study. So again, in our follow-up, we can maybe send out additional information so that if people want to help and to be involved in research, that you'll have that opportunity as well. So our first question for the evening is for Dr. Mousseau. How long do organoids take to grow from a patient's blood sample? And what's the timeline between when a sample is taken and results are available?
Beautiful questions. Thank you very much, Joanne. So for a research point of view, I think that you might remember from the image I showed you, we culture them up to 90 days. And that's only for us to monitor how quickly markers appear and to what extent they appear, like how strong are they. But for actual diagnosis, I don't think we need 90 days. 90 days is just, that's kind of a fun thing for us in terms of working at the bench. If we can identify a donor, a patient donor, the one thing that I want everyone to know is that we're also looking for a sibling who is not suspected of having a dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So we've got a comparator that is genetically similar. But between the time that we could collect the blood to creating the first stem cells takes about 4 weeks. And from that point on, we can put the stem cells in culture, play around with them a little bit. The brain organoids take about a week or two after that to establish. And then once the organoids have established, 30 days later, we could probably tell you if you've got Alzheimer's dementia or not. So whatever that adds up to, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, and a month, you're looking at 10 weeks. Currently, if I understand correctly, and I would reach out to my esteemed colleagues around the table here, I think some wait times often can stretch into months, if not up to a year, to see a specialist to start getting tested. That's not always the case, obviously, but so we're looking at potentially within 2 months, 2.5 months, we can, from blood sample to us telling you have markers of Alzheimer's disease.
Thank you, Darrell, and that is very important. Certainly, early diagnosis is something that we hear regularly from different people around the province that we have consulted with. Our second question is for Dr. Kammer. Can the Cognitive Kitchen program be adapted to be carried out in long-term care settings?
Wow, that's a great question. Possibly. My brain is going all sorts of different directions thinking about that already. There would be potential to have care partners come in and work in some way with their loved ones and staff and have sort of the courses offered in that format. There'd also be potential for gains for the staff themselves. And then another direction might be the house model long-term care, where the multi-skilled workers decide with the residents living with dementia what meals should be made and prepare it in that home-like environment of the small house. Less applicability for the commercial kitchen, large-scale food operations where there isn't, it's just the food safety and kitchen safety rather, sorry, experiences of having others in those kitchens is a bit more challenging, and the strict procurement cycle and menu, etc. But that's a great idea. I know that we had some community-based healthcare providers approach us to say, can you do a special cognitive kitchen program for us so that we can better support patients, families, clients living within the community? And could you tailor it for the healthcare providers so that we can learn and then pass that forward? So there's a few different ideas percolating in different directions for how we can spread the interesting message that healthy eating and food is fun. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Allison. Perhaps a future research project for you. The next question is for the RPC Dementia Research Team. I know that you talked about finding out the prevalence of dementia in custody, but our question is related to that. So do you have a sense of how many people in custody have dementia?
I don't think we do. The phase 1, we identified people that needed further assessment, and so we haven't got our results yet for identifying just how many in custody would have dementia. I can't even really guess, but of the older population, quite a few are older in our population. I did think of another good question when we were listening to the other presentations, and that was the challenges of our research at a correctional center. And one of them was the delays. Our phase 2 was delayed by COVID, and already this year we've had a delay with norovirus, and so that delayed our team going in for data collection. And I guess other challenges too is that we're really working with vulnerable populations of older people with dementia, but also indigenous populations, mental illness, and incarcerated populations. So we have to be very careful too when we go in that we're not giving them any viruses as well. It's more likely that we would give them to them, of course, not that we would get it. So as researchers, we do have to be very, very careful. Thanks.
So just
Maybe.
a follow-up question. So often, like, I know there's other countries like the UK and Japan and other areas that have had multiple years of dementia studies. So they haven't studied dementia rates in their incarcerated populations, or is it just a very different population that other countries wouldn't have data on that at all?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So in terms of the international studies, like that's one of the limitations is there's no like pinpoint prevalence rates. There's very little research in terms of prevalence on dementia or cognitive impairments in custodial populations. So right now, the range is between 1% to 45%, which is the rate that we found in our study. And that's with a screening assessment. So that's not with a dementia diagnosis. And that's one thing that's also lacking within the literature and the research is there's very few studies. To my knowledge, I don't think there's any studies that have actually conducted a full clinical assessment and diagnosis of dementia within a custodial setting. Of course, prison official records would have, those medical records would have that prevalence rate that we're looking for there. But generally speaking, it's very highly variable in terms of the rate from 1% to 45% with those screening tools.
Thank you. So some very novel research happening right here in our own province. The next question is for Louise. Do you have to go through the modules in order? And when will this be widely accessible to the public?
Thank you for that question. So in terms of the modules, we did develop them as a way to for each successive module to build off on the previous module. So we do recommend users to follow it in order. However, we also developed it in the sense of you'll see the different modules that are the information that's covered in different modules. So we really also encourage users to pick which strategy that resonates with them and works best for them and use that and go off from that. But we do recommend the first time that you use it to go through it in order, because it does build off, the information does build off each other. In terms of when it's going to be widely accessible, so it's currently available right now on the App Store as well as Google Play, but we are in the evaluation phase. So we are still testing the app. So it's available for our research participants. And then after this data collection period, and once we've gotten more information about feedback from users, then it'll be available to everyone. But you can technically see it in the App Store right now. And I think there's a question about the email of the study. So I might just type that in the chat. That might be easier for people. But it's yourcaregiverapp@uregina.ca.
And we'll also send that out in our follow-up email as well. Thank you, Louise. So another question for Dr. Kammer. Have you done any post-program follow-up with participants to see if the program inspired a long-lasting change in the participants' diet and approach to food?
So unfortunately, we haven't done anything that we would consider long-term. We do complete the surveys, the post-intervention surveys within a few weeks of participating in the program. And then the interviews with participants are completed about 6 weeks post-program. So we do capture some of the after effects or what's stayed with them post-program. But in terms of long-term impacts, no, we would love to. We don't have the research funding to be able to do that. But I think that in a larger rollout or a next stage of this, we would want to look at, okay, what is sustained and what are some challenges to that as well? If we are talking about dementia with a trajectory of decline, are you equipped to surf those waves effectively and still use some of the strategies as you navigate those different changes that happen as a result of the disease progression. Those would be really interesting questions to ask, and that longer term evaluation and evaluation of the impact is really needed. So hopefully we'll use what we've gained from this research funding to then apply for some more longer term research.
And one more question for you, Allison. Would it be possible to have a box with all the recipe ingredients delivered to participants' homes?
Possible? Yes. Feasibility, it would just cost a lot of money to have somebody organizing that and and contacting the grocery stores in the different communities and getting the orders placed. So with the limited budget right now, we can't do that. But I know that our coordinator has helped people to navigate and explore, is there an option for delivery or pickup, grocery pickup, that kind of thing, and help them with some of that navigation. But we don't have the ability to tailor it and have the, sort of a meal delivery program style intervention. No.
Thank you. And one more question for the RPC team. The role of caregivers is really important in helping to recognize dementia, and often the caregiver recognizes dementia before the person with dementia does. So thinking about the institutional setting, the correctional setting, does staff play a role in helping to identify individuals who may be having warning signs, or are they knowledgeable about warning signs within the system? I'm curious about that.
I can start that off. I think the staff sometimes become their family because they're seeing them every day, and some don't have family that come and visit, and so they do. Certainly, nursing sees them 24 hours and a day, and are aware of just what their care needs are, their sleeping habits, their eating habits, if they're able to still, dress themselves, and their memory. And they see that over time. So they certainly do recognize that, yes.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we are running out of time this evening. So, oh, Dr. Mousseau has his hand up. Sorry. Go ahead, Dr.
Did I actually put my hand up? Okay, I've just got a quick question for Arlene in the crowd. I actually read somewhere that individuals who have been put into solitary confinement are actually at higher risk for developing dementia. And the only reason that I know that is that I was concerned about the whole COVID thing, when people are isolated at home and there's no conversation and there's no community support and there's no interaction, which are very, very important for us to maintain some sort of cognitive abilities and development. And I was just wondering if you've noticed in your test cohorts whether there's any differences in your individuals who are more prone to being thrown in the hole, so to speak, versus those that are left out in the general population.
They're certainly at risk for a lot more things because of that, being incarcerated and being just not out in the community anymore. So they're very, very much more isolated. Certainly the prevalence of dementia we know is higher in the custodial setting or the custody setting than in the general population because of all the risk factors, and they age quicker in custody. I know there's, I haven't read the studies about seclusion and restraint and seclusion. And now there's strict policies, certainly too, on secluding people as well. So they certainly try not to do that, but maybe other people in the team have got some ideas to share as well.
It's okay. I didn't want to dominate the conversation. I know we're coming to an end.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a thought I had while we were closing up. Sorry, Joanne, but thanks, Arlene. Thank you.
Yeah.
Not a problem. It's interesting to see the interaction between researchers and the questions and the interests. So On behalf of the Alzheimer's Society, again, I want to thank Merle for sharing her story. That's why you're here tonight. That's why research is important. We certainly want to make things better for people living with dementia, and it's people, you and your stories and the caregivers across Saskatchewan who really inspire researchers to do the kind of work that they do. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us this evening. And thank you to all of our researchers. We had quite a breadth of research from biomedical to the applied research and lots of very different research ideas. But I think tonight really demonstrates to people who are interested in research, the varied questions that are out there, the involvement of people with lived experience in the projects and helping to drive the work of researchers, and that's so important. Some very novel research that's happening here in our province. As the Alzheimer's Society, we're very proud to be funding research, and our board has a priority to dramatically increase the amount of funding that we support to research. So thank you for coming here tonight, and thank you also to all of our participants for registering. Again, following this evening, watch for an email where we'll send out a survey to gather feedback and to get your insights into different research that you'd like to hear about. And we'll also follow up with some of the information that was shared in the presentation tonight so that you have more information about the projects and the ones that you can get involved with. So thank you so much, everybody. And we'll sign off now, and I'll wish everybody a wonderful evening.